To break this down further, let me bring in Pat Brady, a former federal prosecutor and former member of the Republican National Committee. Pat, good to see you. Okay, so we still have a little bit more of Michael Cohen's testimony, but this point in the case, do you think the prosecution has proved their case beyond a reasonable doubt?
I think they proved the misdemeanor. I think they proved that Donald Trump had an affair with Stormy Daniels in the Playboy model, and that he and Cohen concocted this scheme to, filter it through the way they did, disguise it as legal fees, which is a misdemeanor under New York law. But for the life of me, I still don't understand how they have bootstrapped this into a felony, some kind of election fraud case.
Can I push you back on that? Can I ask you about that? This is the way that, because this is with the counter argument, right? So you're right.
Sure.
Falsifying business records, that's a misdemeanor, but with the intent, the criminal intent that you had to, and according to New York law, is that you had to promote a candidate through unlawful means. And this idea of although the hush money payments are not, illegal in of themselves, it's the idea of you were purposely disguising these payments because you didn't want anyone to know it because it was going to affect your chances in the election. It wasn't for personal reasons, but for the election. If that's what they're going to argue, is that a crime, and did they prove it?
Well, let's take a step back. At the end of this trial, which I agree with you, might end this week, or right before the jury goes to deliberate, there's going to be what's called jury instructions, where the judge is going to instruct the jury on the law. And in this case, typically they're cookie cutter, but in this case, the judge and the lawyers are going to have to craft an instruction I think is going to dictate whether or not the jury is going to agree that the prosecution proved that. But Jesse, my bigger issue with this, and I'm not a Trump supporter, I'm just saying this as a former prosecutor, I don't know why they brought this case. And this is anybody but Donald Trump. A case like this turned into a felony doesn't get brought. And to your other point, there are many reasons that he didn't want anybody to know about this, including his wife, his family, his business interests. So I think the prosecution, I would not be surprised if this is not a banner day for the prosecution. I may be wrong. He's been convicted on everything else or found liable in New York. But I for the life of me, have never understood this case. There are bigger things we should be doing. And to charge the former president of the United States in this way, I think is a real miscarriage of justice.
You think the defense puts on a case? You think Donald Trump decides to take the stand?
Trump will not hit the stand under any circumstances unless he absolutely demands. And now that's his right. But his lawyers, I'm sure, advise him he shouldn't testify. The only witness I could think that might, and it's a little bit risky, help the defense is put on a witness about campaign finance and what constitutes a violation. But I would not be surprised if they just rest without putting on any witnesses.
And talk about Michael Cohen. So Todd Blanche, Donald Trump's attorney, spent a considerable amount of time cross-examining or questioning him, even caught him up in some inconsistencies, questioning whether certain things happened. How effective was the cross-examination?
Well, I think it meandered a lot of it, but he really closed strongly, which, he thought about that all weekend. That's what the jury had to think about all weekend. Michael Cohen is certainly a flawed witness. But in any of these cases, when you put these kind of witnesses on, I used to do these kind of white-collar cases, you don't necessarily put your case on the credibility of that witness. What he said is important, but it's always substantiated by other corroborating evidence, other witness, other documents, which I think Cohen was. But I still think they haven't gotten to the point of turning this into a felony.
I got another question for you. It's a little bit of a mix of legal and politics, and I thought you'd be a perfect one to answer this. If he's convicted, or if there is a mistrial, okay? Because there's always a possibility that you could have a holdout and this mistrial. I'll start with the mistrial first. If there's a mistrial, I feel like that's a win for Donald Trump politically and legally. Walk me through what that would happen. Do you think he would be retried again? What would be the political effect of that, too?
I think this whole thing, and this is why I always laugh at the argument that the Trump people make, and I get why they do it, like, oh, this is a big conspiracy to keep him off of the campaign trail. He does better as a candidate in both fundraising and in polling numbers when he's standing outside the courthouse screaming that he's been a victim. This has been an absolute boon for him. And that's back even to the decision of the DA to prosecute him. I'll never get it. There are two other very important federal cases that we should be looking at, right? Not this New York books and records case. It's just really a colossal waste of time.
But if he's convicted, does that change your opinion?
Well, here's the thing. It could happen. I think they're probably going to get a lesser included instruction, meaning they can convict him on the misdemeanor and not on the top line, which I think ultimately does hurt the former president, ultimately does. A mistrial probably helps him. An acquittal, I think, helps him greatly because they've charged this stupid case, in my opinion, first, the more important, really substantive and good cases are going to be diminished.
Well, yeah, and if they even happen. But Pat Brady, thanks so much for coming on. Enjoyed talking to you.
All right. See you, Jess. Good weekend.
Hey, thank you for watching. please go to newsnationnow.com, newsnationnow.com, and you can find News Nation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button down below. Then you will get more of News Nation's fact-driven coverage.